This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome, Gauri.
Hi, Bhavin.
Hi, Nitin. After a long time, I was just recollecting you
Yeah, I
yesterday.
was able to. Oh, okay.
Hi, Nitin.
Just able to make it earlier.
Yeah.
Sir, good evening.
Hi, how are you, Nitin? I was
Sir,
just
I'm fine, sir.
recollecting
How are
you
you?
yesterday. Good, good, good.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, Manish. Welcome, Mohindra Singh.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Hi, Bhavan. Good
Hi,
evening. Hi,
good
everyone.
evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, all members.
Good evening. So, shall we start or should we wait, Purvi?
I think we
Because,
should start now.
okay, because Ashish, Vinith, and Ram Verma. Okay, so let me introduce Mr. Rahul Jain. Is presently welcome Rahul Jain. Yeah, so Vinith has arrived. Just wait. Vinith, hello, Vinith. Is that audible? Vinith,
Yeah, you are audible, Bhavan.
but I think Vinith. Vinith.
Yes, Bobby.
ठीक है. Okay. So everything is
Yeah,
set, Vinith. Great.
yeah.
Okay. So let me introduce. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual meeting 9. So today is a very interesting topic. The practical case study: how to unearth the fraud through the audit techniques. This is the case topic which we have discussed based on our understanding of all the members, okay, which are the topics every month we can able to take it. So it is a very great privilege to our internal audit study group by having on board Mr. Rahul Jain. He is presently VP of HDFC Life. Thank you, Rahul, for accepting our invitation and taking this session for how to identify the various frauds in the financial service sector. And yeah, can you mute?
And someone just be on mute, yeah.
Okay. So thanks, Rahul, for accepting our invitation and taking your valuable time for taking gone through various techniques how to identify the various frauds. I would like to tell Mr. Vinit to please have a formal introduction of Mr. Rahul Jain. Vinit?
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. My name is Vinit Vyas. And just give a quick introduction of today's speaker. So today's speaker is, as Bhavin said, is Rahul Jain. He has overall 15 years of experience into an internal audit and risk management processes across financial services, wherein Rahul Jain has handled auditing corporate functions, processes, inspecting sub brokers, third party vendors, fraud investigations, SEBI PIT compliances, and various other activities related to internal audit. So he was with Kotak Securities from April 17 to December 14, where he was handling the operational risk management framework. And as Bhavin had mentioned, presently he is like leading the internal audit function of HDFC Life Insurance since December 14. So over to you, Bhavin.
Yeah. So thanks, Vinit, for the great introduction. Rahul?
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just switch on my camera. Yeah, please.
Yeah, please. Because I think from my laptop, I think the camera is not working.
I was also able to switch on earlier. I don't know, suddenly I'm not able to.
Can anybody able to switch on the videos? Welcome, Ashish.
Is there any admin who has to allow this?
Even I am not able, because I just now spoken to the technical team. I was not able to allow the switch on my camera. Just now I just checked the technical team.
I think the camera access has been denied, so no one will be able to switch it on.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Otherwise,
No
can I
worries.
call no worries, or is it fine?
Yeah. It's absolutely fine. In fact, in the last 2 years, we are all used to, having our cameras switched off for most of the time. So, good evening, everyone. Probably after ages, I'm probably kind of connecting with members of ICAI, WIRC. Going back to the roots is always a great pleasure. And thank you, Bhavin and Vinit, for the introduction and giving me this opportunity to obviously share my experience in terms of what kind of I have gone through, I have done in my last 15 years. Obviously, that doesn't mean that that everything is over. Obviously, the learning exercise or the learning curve just moves from one direction to the other. I'm more than happy to learn from you all as well, basis your experience. So what we can do is obviously to make this session more engaging. I'll be more than happy to have your inputs, feedback, and maybe let us make it very interactive so that I can also take back few things as I also share my learning and my experience. So thank you very much. Yeah. So Bhavin, can we just start off?
Sure. So almost every participants have joined it, maximum. So it is 16. Good to go.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So today's topic, a very interesting one, honestly, unearthing frauds by the auditor. So I've been an internal auditor always in last 15 years. So as an internal auditor, typically what you obviously look into is more around processes. At the end of the day, obviously to give that assurance to your management that your processes and the related controls which have been built to mitigate risks are obviously operating effectively. So what is your role as an auditor when you obviously look into all of these to also look into few of the aspects around fraud, because we all know that nobody is kind of away from any kind of a fraud. Fraud is obviously at the end of the day inevitable. Everyone has to kind of experience that, because as you experience, obviously you kind of move ahead, you develop, you strengthen your systems and processes more, you learn from them, and you move ahead. So quite an interesting topic. Obviously we can have endless debate and discussion around this. Just to kind of give you a recap, obviously this week also we had two fraud events. One was the ABG shipyard versus the banks, and obviously the second one was NSE versus SBI, which obviously in last 2 days or 3 days we've got some development. So yeah, I mean, we all keep on hearing about frauds. Some of them are obviously very transactional, some of them are very big, which obviously have systemic risk. As a country, obviously a lot of us have to face them. In the past also they've happened, be it Yes Bank, ILNFS, you name it, and you have them. So those are all obviously corporate frauds, and obviously frauds at a higher level of authority. Definitely we can have one more session in future in case we get that slot to discuss about them. I would also want to kind of understand from each one of you in terms of how you all have gone through. The agenda what we have today is obviously to share my experience on some of the frauds that I have experienced being in the financial services industry for the last 15 years. So I was always part of the internal audit function at my previous stint with a brokerage firm, and now I'm with an insurance company. Honestly speaking, I haven't seen anything different. So being an internal auditor, at the end of the day, you should be good at your own skill sets. As an internal auditor, your technicals and everything should be smart. I mean, you can just move into any financial services company, be it bank, mutual fund, insurance, anything. So it doesn't make change, because at the end of the day in financial services what changes is obviously a product, and nothing beyond that. Yeah, so I'll quickly kind of move to the next slide. So this is the broad agenda that we have. We'll be talking about frauds. I'll just give you a quick background, because some of them are kind of more very basic things to understand, while we obviously follow it up with case study, and then some things that we have to take away, what is that we can use as part of our daily routine as an internal auditor into the processes that we audit. And obviously at the end of the day, since it's a fraud, there is some regulatory expectations around frauds in terms of reporting and all of that, and that's how we will go about. So I'll just move to the next slide. So feel free to kind of interrupt me at any point in time and have your questions. Okay, so let us make this one a very engaging one rather than just be one-sided. I've been given good 1.5 hours, so obviously just by talking myself I'll not be able to do that. I can do that, but I don't want to do that. So I'll be more than happy to have your questions, any learning experience from each one of you. Yeah, so I mean, fraud definition, fraud is defined at many places. From a regulatory perspective, you would have seen some presentations जिसमें के Latin definition क्या है, Greek definition क्या है, एक वो fraud triangle होता है. All of those are obviously theories, but yes, theories are relevant for all of us to kind of take as a starting point. Obviously when you get into all of these, you need to understand. But yeah, once you start experiencing, you yourself will kind of define or kind of create a definition of fraud. So which is what I always believe, that just be open to this, because fraud is not something which can be written or you can be given a guidance note on. What we can be given is obviously experiences to learn from and ensure that we prevent them as many as they can happen. So that's what is something which I define fraud as. While yes, under various laws, fraud has been defined as intention to deceive, concealment of a fact, causing wrongful gain, wrongful loss. या मतलब intention होना चाहिए, कुछ छुपाओगे, concealment of a fact. At the end of the day, it is done obviously to, benefit someone and create a loss to someone else. And above all, what is more important to ensure that a fraud happens is obviously there should be an opportunity. If there isn't any opportunity, then obviously it's not so easier to kind of do a fraud. So obviously that opportunity should get created for anyone to commit fraud. So any questions that anyone has on this, or anyone would want to share anything on this slide, which is very basic slide, I can understand, but still anything beyond that I have said.
So fraud, what I say, it is basically a perspective of the person or at the top of the management, how it is a fraud basically. So for some, I can say we take a office printout. So can we consider this as a fraud for a personal printout?
Yeah, right.
So it is the top management or a top vote to decide what would be considered as a fraud for them perspective,
Yeah.
right? Because
So
for
which
myself, if I am taking a printout for a personal and if my boss is fine, so whether this would be a fraud as per the definition?
obviously not. So you rightly
So
pointed out, which is one of the definition that says at the end of the day, one has to establish that there was an intent to do something, So if you were not aware about a company policy not allowing you to kind of, take a printout and you can prove that very well, obviously there is no intent. But if obviously there was an intent, you knew about it and you still did it, obviously, I mean, while not this one, but yeah, obviously there has to be an intent for anyone to kind of say that this is a fraud. Till the time the intent is not proved, obviously it cannot be, or it is very difficult to kind of prove that it could be a fraud. Yeah. Everything starts with an intent. Obviously, a fraudster, it is more of a mindset that it starts with, and then probably gets into all the things. So पहले वो बोलते हैं ना कि mindset बनाओ कि अपने को करना है कुछ ऐसा. Yeah. I'll just move to the next slide now. Yeah. So the financial services industries, I mean, not just professionally, you would have kind of experienced or done something on any of these frauds. I mean, we hear them day in, day out, and also in our personal experiences, be with us or be with any of our relatives, friends, colleagues, we would have obviously heard about all of these frauds, which typically take part in the financial services, be it a Ponzi scheme wherein someone at some part of India, maybe very tier 2, tier 3 kind of a city, one sub broker is giving you a short return of say 15%, 20%, whatever, running into a Ponzi scheme, obviously then picking up people to kind of have their monies invested. At the end of the day, obviously it gets busted. I mean, there's nothing that eventually there will be a day when it will get over. Okay, so Ponzi, we've heard a lot of Ponzi schemes that come out. Document tampering is a very common fraud. It is done not just to kind of so document tampering can be not just for financial gain or anything to do a bigger fraud. Obviously it can also be to kind of process something. It's like saying that I've gone to I've gone to a branch of a insurance company or a broker or anyone to give a रिक्वेस्ट. उन्होंने बोला सर आपका ये केवाईसी रिक्वेस्ट में ये जो आपने बैंक स्टेटमेंट दिया है या ये आपने जो बिल दिया हुआ है टेलीफोन का या whatever electricity bill, this is quite dated, we want latest, we want last 3 months, last 6 months. Then I mean, that is something that kind of induces someone ki kabhi kaun jayega yaar wapas. I'll do some changes on my own on a mobile phone or whatever, and I'll just hand it over to him rather than going back and asking for a new one. So that's document tampering which happens probably across, and not that this is something which is avoidable. Difficult to obviously identify also, but yes, we will, as we go along, we will learn in terms of how do you kind of catch them, or at least try to detect them, identify them, or be able to kind of highlight them. Yeah. Phishing, OTP, cyber, we've seen them all. We've heard them about last 2 years, since everyone kind of went into a lockdown mode. Everyone kind of in this pandemic, obviously a lot of us got used to getting into digital avenues to give our requests, to do a lot of banking, broking, trading, everything, while and that has become a new norm, not just with us, who are obviously very easier adopter of digital technology, but also with certain age groups who were obviously not used to it. In last 2 years, we have seen them grow into this, go into this. I have myself seen my parents, my few of my relatives getting into this. But yes, they always, at least when they don't understand, they come back to you, they ask, what is this, what is that we need to do, so that you can guide them well, so obviously help them prevent from some misuse being done with them. Misuse of authority is obviously more of a higher level fraud. A person with greater authority decides to do something. He knows that he has the powers, so he can do that. He can get those things done. The way it has happened in some of the corporate frauds that have happened in last few years, it was largely because of the authority or the position that one person was having. Probably he was misusing it, forcing it upon others. So that's misuse of authority. Mis-selling, quite common in financial services industry. A lot to do with the fact that the kind of customer awareness about products, about services. So mis-selling is one of them. So mis-selling is across. I mean, we hear them, we experience them day in, day out. Mis-selling could have also happened with one of us as well. Corruption is something that is prevalent. Again, corruption could be because of few people having great powers and position, and who kind of take misuse of their own position, their power, to kind of cause unnecessary trouble to someone. They will obviously ask every time for something or the other to ensure that their things get processed. So corruption is typically prevalent largely where you have bigger things to be done, few maybe with authorities. It's quite common with authorities. It's obviously not necessary that it's with authorities, it's always there at other places as well. So corruption is always being linked to a set of people, individual or group, but the other thing would be is what we call it as is bribery. So that becomes a quite common norm. Identity theft, yeah, I mean, that's something that people use to obviously, it's like saying impersonating yourself as Rahul Jain and kind of getting into or accessing someone else's accounts or someone else's policies, and kind of doing some fraud into that. So that is all about identity theft. We will obviously talk in detail about a few of them in the next few slides that we have. I have just captured a recent survey results of Deloitte, which is also available in public domain. But before I go to this, can others kind of let me know a few other things in frauds which are obviously not appearing in the small circle that I made? Anything that you would want to share beyond this? It could obviously fall ultimately into one of these, but yeah, I mean, anything, I mean, that someone would want to share here. किसी के साथ कुछ भी पर्सनली हुआ है, आई एम श्योर कभी ना कभी आई एम बीइंग एन इंटरनल ऑडिटर और बीइंग इनटू दिस प्रोफेशन आल्सो, मेरे साथ भी पास्ट में एक आध बार तो हुआ ही है, ऐसा नहीं कि नहीं हुआ है. इट कुड बी अ लोअर इम्पैक्ट, बट स्टिल आई मीन we've been kind of conned, because at times we always experience कि we always think कि भैया ये करना चाहिए नहीं करना चाहिए, and at times you are kind of being forced to do something, maybe you overlook at something, at the end you experience कि यार ये तो मेरे साथ fraud हो गया. So ultimately if one has to find a root cause of fraud, it will be the oversight, lack of awareness is what is always being kind of related to fraud, which is why financial services में बोलते हैं कि भैया कस्टमर खुद ही मौका देता है फ्रॉडस्टर को फ्रॉड करने के लिए. So basically the opportunity is created by all of us as a customer, because if we are aware about certain things, obviously we will be looking into them, we will always have oversight over certain things. So it becomes critical as a customer, obviously, to look into these aspects.
Some days back, I received one call,
Yeah.
and they told me that you had one policy with Exa Life, and your policy you had deposited 14,000 rupees. Now that now that values to 42,000 rupees. We want to pay you back the money, and because your we are not able to communicate with you. So I told them that send me the mail. Why are you waiting for? Why are you talking to me over phone only? So then they said ki your mail ID. What is your mail ID? I told that you should have that mail ID. Then they purposely told a wrong mail ID, and then I told that this mail ID is wrong. Why don't you correct this? Well, no, we can't correct it. I will give my line to the salesperson. He will talk to you. He will correct this. So they did all those things. So I sensed that they are calling wrongly. Then I called customer care number of the Exa Life, and I asked them that I have received one call like this, and they have given one policy number to me, and they are saying that, oh, in this policy I have this much amount due to me. Then they responded, no sir, there is no policy like this with us, and thanks for calling us. We have noted down this telephone number, and we have given to our vigilance cell to find out what are they doing. So that's the situation actually.
Okay, so you never had a AXA Life policy at all with you?
Yeah. No. Actually, I was not able to recall also, but they keep on insisting. Most probably they have some data from other policy. Most probably.
Yeah. So I have in fact included that as one of the case study. Good that you didn't kind of help them to create an opportunity. So because ideally had you kind of shared few of your personal details, then they could have kind of got into the mode and done something with you. Good that you kind of stopped them in between. So that's what I mean. That's the kind of awareness that we all should be kind of knowing, because आपको अगर कोई बोल दे कि आपका 14,000 42,000 हो गया, वो बोलेगा भैया तो मैं तो सारी चीजें दे दूंगा तेरे को इन्फॉर्मेशन. 3 गुना पैसा अगर आपको बोले कि आपने इतना जमा किया और 3 गुना पैसा बन गया है, तो you will be more than happy to kind of give you all that. So good that you didn't create an opportunity for him to get into certain personal details of you, because otherwise that could have been kind of a root cause for the fraud to happen.
That's correct.
Nice. Anyone else? Anything?
So one of the issues that hi, this is Ashish. I joined a little late today.
Hi, Ashish.
One of the things is that where the system gets hacked, and that system is being made as a host to do a further fraud. So what happens is that you become part of that fraud in any case, because your system gets hacked, and then that system is made the host, because when somebody will do the tracking, which I'm sure you will take up later, what would happen is that your system would also get under that loop, saying that you were party to that entire fraud. So that also becomes a fraud. This thing. I think cyber frauds would cover a lot of such issues. Data is taken away, and there is this this what we call as ransom. Where ransom they ask for. So I guess that is something that is very unique and we normally miss out. We feel कि मेरा बैंक account safe है, मैंने OTP नहीं दिया, तो कुछ मेरे से हो नहीं रहा है. But your system may become the host for doing another fraud somewhere. You will be surprised
So,
to note where the police comes to you and asks you why you have done this. So वो एक aspect होता है which is a different way. Otherwise most of the things you have covered in this circle that you have made.
Right. Yeah, in fact, cyber frauds, honestly speaking, Ashish, we should have a separate topic altogether because it's endless. And given the fact that there are no boundaries of that, and there would be multiple types of cyber frauds. But yes, in last 2 years, which is what we've experienced. So this Deloitte survey has typically, kind of captured some of these pointers as well. So this is just an extract of the results of the survey. At the end, I have just captured the entire survey file, which is obviously available for all of us on public domain. So typically what they've done is they have obviously, they do the survey with the financial services company, the auditors, the risk managers, and everyone. They kind of take their responses to understand what has happened in the last 2 years. So what they've identified is basically the top 3 responses, as you all can see. I mean, the root cause or the main response or the reason for the frauds happening has been because all of us have kind of gone into a remote working model. So be it your customer or be it the employee of the company, both of them are working remotely. In fact, all the contact center employees, as I have also experienced, were also operating remotely. Not that the call centers were operating, the call center employees were also kind of given accesses to operate from their homes, and they were kind of contacting the customer. So remote working has its own challenges, and obviously the kind of risk that you are exposed to in terms of data. I mean, apne ghar pe, irrespective of how much ever controls you may implement into your system, like आप पेन ड्राइव ब्लॉक कर दोगे, आप DLP mechanism डाल दोगे, कुछ भी कर लोगे. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're remote, nobody kind of stops you from doing certain things which cannot be controlled. आप वीडियो मैसेज कुछ भी लेके आप डेटा इधर उधर कर सकते हो. So large scale remote working model was the biggest factor which was responsible for frauds, and obviously for all of us also, because we also kind of adopted digital. I'll just give you a simple example. I mean, we all went into a lockdown and we started receiving calls because we all know we were used to something doing physically, or if not physically, at least we had that mind frame that was people are in their offices, people are in their branches, they are in their offices, hence hopefully all of that what is happening is all secure. But digitally everything, you tend to kind of fall into all of these, and then these just takes you back. Second is customers, obviously remote working models so company ke ho gaye, but customers bhi non-branch banking channel, we all adopted digital channels across ages. People were forced to get into this. Kisi 60 years ke 70 year ke senior citizen ko, if he wants some financial product, obviously he didn't have a choice but to go digital, and there are a lot of things which lured him to go digital. is सामने से फोन आ जाता है, easy हो जाता है सारी चीजें. You never know in that journey कि आपने कब क्या compromise कर लिया और कब आपके साथ fraud हो गया at the end. You just wait for a few more days and then you come to that because there is something which has happened which is not right or which is something very unusual. But तब तक तो हो गया रहता है. Third thing, I mean, I would just want to say or probably put this one as we all kind of went into this this pandemic thing. The existing जो भी corporates या जो भी auditors के पास जो avenues थे, जो तरीके से वो लोग they were doing audits, or probably the fraud risk management team was looking into suspicious transactions or everything. Suddenly the entire vertical kind of changed, because and you would have obviously thought about it to kind of incorporate those changes into your new mechanism. and by the time you will kind of incorporate all of that into your existing tool, technology, mechanism, या जो भी आपकी checklist है या जो भी है, it would obviously take some time. And taking that time would mean that obviously the fraud would have already happened, because fraudsters are always one step ahead. They are, unki planning बहुत खतरनाक होती है. They are always before us, which is why frauds happened, and we are only able to catch them after they have happened. Very rarely, that's another question that I will have it in next few slides. As in, is anyone able to catch something which has happened, which was about to happen, लेकिन उसके पहले ही आपने निकाल के बता दिया हो कि भैया ये गलत होने वाला था या ये कल या परसों गलत होने वाला है. So that's something is always a question. Fraud, second aspect of the survey responses was how are frauds typically detected. Audit, reconciliation is all post facto, and I don't know if you kind of we all kind of know, or rather typically would be aware of the kind of processes in every company or a financial services company which are prone to frauds, like claims, payout. I mean, wherever the customer's money is involved, or when the customer is coming to the company and bringing in his money. So these are something which probably are the fraud prone areas. So only when an audit happens, and the audit obviously happens with a lag, so that obviously delays everything, unless until you obviously have a framework in place wherein your control function, as in your process owner, regularly does something to kind of identify suspicious transaction and do all of that. But in the scenario that we were all into, that was also obviously not possible, or obviously if it was happening, it was happening with a delay. Then customer complaints, internal whistleblower complaint. In fact, अगर मैं बोलूँ तो ये सबसे last resort है जिसमें आपको fraud पता चल जाएगा. And lot of the companies across financial services, this is one of the top contributor, that at least at the end of the day, it is a customer who was obviously sleeping, who has finally awakened and has come to you and has kind of made you aware about a fraud which has happened in his or her account. So that's one of the reasons. So while obviously audit is something that will eventually identify and highlight, but it is generally customer complaint or whistleblower जिसके through frauds पता चलते हैं. The last part of the response is basically what is possibly someone can experience in the next 2 years, last 2 years. So data theft, cybercrime, all of these are linked to the fact that we all went digital, remote. Third party induced fraud are very common, wherein some external guy having access to your data in collusion with your employees obviously does some kind of a fraud. Bribery, corruption, very common. As we move along, these would be there, but yes, a lot of deterrents are in place by companies and everything, but the deterrents at the end of the day doesn't add to become a preventive control or probably a detective control. Those are all deterrent, but if a person decides to move ahead out of that, obviously he can just go ahead and do it by obviously identifying the weakness in your processes and obviously finding an opportunity to do the fraud. Fake fraudulent documentation again is a common reason or a root cause for any fraud to happen. Yeah, we say that we've gone live with Aadhaar authentication and all of that. Honestly speaking, if you ask me, my industry experience suggests that not at every places you find a Aadhaar authenticated KYC process. If at all it would be there, we all know, and I will obviously share my experience in terms of how does that also happen, wherein you can also have fake Aadhaar. Obviously fake as in the Aadhaar is belonging to someone else, but it has been made in the name of someone else, जिसके account में या जिसके policy में या जिसके इसमें fraud करना है. Yeah, so that's fake fraudulent documentation for you. Yeah. Any questions, or else I'll just quickly move to the next slide. I'll just move to the next slide. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, this is just a differentiation between what do we do. I mean, I believe while this is more on the internal audit that we are obviously discussing, but yes, just wanted to highlight quickly the difference that we have between three of these. The reading the terminology itself kind of gives you an idea that forensic would generally be something जब कुछ हो गया है या पता चला है कि कुछ तो fishy है, wherein the company or the client obviously knows that कुछ तो fraud हुआ है, and that is when they kind of ask for a forensic audit to be done, and it's a in-depth audit. Obviously the scope will obviously have to be agreed with the management, probably where they feel that there was a fraud which has happened, but yes, the scope, the methodology, the mechanism of doing that audit is completely different from what we would obviously do in internal audit. Internal audit is more about obviously providing an assurance on the internal controls which are part of every process. It's obviously a sample based review. Yes, you can always say that there are certain tests which could also be happening on population or on large data, but at the end of the day you will give assurance on the process for a particular period. Statutory audit obviously is just limited to financial statements. A lot of dependency would happen on the management giving a reliance, or probably reliance, or probably a management giving you an oversight on the controls and the governance that are there within the organization. So a statutory auditor typically as part of his interaction, आप लोगों ने देखा होगा हर क्वार्टर में आएगा वो रिस्पेक्टिव इंटरनल ऑडिटर से, या अगर उस टीम में अगर उस कंपनी में एक फ्रॉड रिस्क मैनेजमेंट फ्रेमवर्क होगा, सो दे विल ऑब्वियसली टॉक टू देम, दे विल अंडरस्टैंड इफ एनी फ्रॉड हैज हैपेंड, what has happened, क्या हुआ, कितना बड़ा है, material है, non material है, and all of that conversation will obviously happen for him to kind of assess whether that fraud has got any impact on the financial statements on which he will be presenting an opinion to the board of directors. So that's where the statutory auditor kind of largely places reliance on the management. But yes, statutory auditor as part of his own audit procedures, while looking into the financial statements, comes to know that they actually don't look the way they should be, or he obviously identifies anything unusual, then it calls out for fraud. But yeah, generally from the operational perspective, they are dependent on the management to kind of make them aware about any fraud, any material fraud, which would obviously have an opinion question, is what they expect. So that's quickly a difference between these three types of audits that we have. Anyone can just tell me, just a question that I had, when we do internal audit, do anyone, while concluding the audit report, kind of give any limitation or disclaimer, and what could be that? Sorry, yeah. Hello, are you able to hear me?
Oh, yes, Rahul. Yes,
Yes,
I'm able to hear you.
yes, Rahul.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if you all use it. I always kind of give a limitation. I very clearly spell it out in my internal audit reports that we do. Obviously, this is an internal audit report and this is not a investigation report. So I don't know how many of you really include that disclaimer or kind of a limitation that your audit procedures obviously did not involve anything which was of investigative nature. Yes, you might have reviewed a process from a fraud risk perspective, but not that you have done an investigation on the transactions which would have been audited or on the controls which would have been audited.
Yeah, so
And
Rahul,
yeah,
what we do is we write something like this, that internal audit activity cannot be relied upon to detect frauds or to disclose all irregularities that may exist. This is
right.
like a note that we write to before we start our report. So these are points, and certainly we write that it is designed to provide reasonable assurance to management of effectiveness of internal control. This, that. वो सब तो लिखते ही है, but this is a specific line that must be written in all
Yeah.
internal audit reports.
Yeah. In fact, I would suggest if each one of you, kind of is not, because we are guided by certain principles. We obviously follow certain procedures. So we should be sure in terms of what assurance we are expressing in our internal audit report. While you always have scope limitation, आप लोग डालते होंगे कि ये area हमको audit करने नहीं मिला for whatever reasons, which obviously have to be very clearly spelled out. But yes, this is also something that you should add to your internal audit reports, because at the end of the day, it's an internal audit report. Okay, this is not an investigation. Matlab, the expectation was not that you look into every transaction from an investigation perspective or from a suspicious perspective, because then the whole essence of giving an assurance is lost. You then tend to kind of get into a different mode of auditing altogether, which is not auditing at all, which is obviously more of a investigation. So we should always differentiate between an audit and investigation is what is my opinion. And I would rather want, if someone is obviously not adopting this, I would suggest you can just start including this as part of your report, because it's obviously not a investigation report. Yeah. I'll just move to the next slide. Yeah, so next few slides will be kind of based, one of the case studies based on this. I just wanted to give you a background. So we've been hearing, so this is a number that I want to give, put into perspective. This was something which was presented by the finance ministry to the parliament sometime in December. Just mentioned these are quite dated in terms of when these outstandings would be there. So there is a lot of unclaimed monies, which is lying with financial institutions like banks, insurance, mutual funds. While this number is at 51,500, I'll tell you honestly, this could be much bigger than this. It's not just 51,500; it's beyond that. Is what I'm sure. But yes, we go back and we just kind of reflect what has been highlighted. So this represents opportunity, obviously, for the fraudsters. Okay, and let me tell you, there are a lot of frauds which are happening in these accounts, which are unclaimed, which are dormant, which are not active for long, for various reasons. They could be dormant, inactive, for whatever reason. The customer may not be existing, customer may not be in India, he may have gone abroad, he may obviously not know about them, and even if some of them know, they just don't bother to check and understand these things. So yes, a lot of unclaimed monies lying, which obviously represents an opportunity for the fraudsters to do something, to plan for frauds, to execute frauds. There is obviously a modus operandi, and there is a way out to get into this. So naturally, then that becomes an opportunity for the auditors, and not obviously to do a fraud, but obviously when you know that there is an opportunity for fraud, there is an opportunity for us to kind of ensure that we prevent them to happen by ensuring that the company or the client has got appropriate systems, controls, processes to prevent. The reason I'll tell you why this becomes an opportunity is because they are being categorized as such by these companies. So इंश्योरेंस कंपनी हो या बैंक में डोरमेंट अकाउंट पॉलिसी होती है, डोरमेंट अकाउंट्स are being marked as dormant. So obviously people know कि what is dormant, कौन से account dormant है, कौन से में कितना पैसा है, and all of that. Insurance company में there are certain statuses against the policies which kind of gives an idea that this policy is in lapse status, this is not an active customer policy. So there are a lot of these identification also which have been made in the system, and there are requirements obviously to make those identification as well, so that it becomes easier for the company to track them also. The whole reason is obviously unclaimed is for whatever customer reasons, but there is a lot of regulatory pressure which is there. Regulatory pressure as in the regulators also expect that boss, as a company, as a client, you create avenues. आप लोग रास्ता बनाओ ताकि कोई भी कस्टमर को पता करना है कि उसका कुछ पैसा, अनक्लेम पैसा अगर किसी कंपनी में पड़ा हुआ है, be it insurance, banks, तो he should be able to identify that and he should be able to take that. Because क्या होता है कि बहुत सारा पैसा हो सकता है 15 साल, 20 साल, 10 साल, 5 साल पुराना है. So you will not be able to trace your own document. You will not be able to trace the document and all. So naturally that becomes an opportunity for all of us to as an auditor to ensure that we review proper systems and controls to prevent any misuse. Yeah. So I'll just move to the next slide, which is the case study. So this was the background that I wanted to. So first case study is something that I have also kind of experienced, and this is more or less an industry experience as well. This is something which is a fraud, a fraud into a customer's account. Obviously, this is experienced by anyone, be it a stockbroker, depository participant, banks, insurance companies, and everyone. So typically, how this fraud happens is obviously identification of inactive dormant account which are holding unclaimed funds, जिसमें कुछ investment पड़ा हुआ है, किसी के stocks पड़े हुए, किसी demat account में. So basically the critical step is first to identify कि क्या dormant है, क्या inactive है. So how would that happen is obviously some data leakage which would have happened, or who can do this? As I mentioned here, it could be an internal person or an external person. External person, yes, there are a lot of groups which are operating outside, which kind of in collusion with internal employees, yeah, through some network they access companies' data, through which obviously then they start getting into the customer's account, their policies. So all of these external employees, internal employees as well, be it a present employee who obviously knows everything and anything about that process, he himself has got access to the data. So it could be an internal or an external employee doing this kind of a fraud. So who does this is something that obviously is very open. It can be an external person and internal person doing this. So that's the modus operandi which starts off with. So what we found is basically how it eventually happens is there would be someone who would be coming to a branch. Of late, in last 2 years, as we've read about in the past that people were using digital touchpoints, so it became more easier for some of them to do frauds. So digital touchpoint पे जाएगा, कंपनी ने एवेन्यूज बहुत क्रिएट करके रखा हुआ है कि आप हमको ईमेल से रिक्वेस्ट भेज सकते हो, आप हमको ब्रांच जाके भेज सकते हो, आप ऑनलाइन लॉगिन करके भेज सकते हो. So this is the way the request is given. In last 2 years, the preference has been to be digital, because at least you will be avoiding that risk of interacting with someone. In fact, in my experience, I have seen or rather understood from people in the industry that people have used multiple avenues. So inquiry करेगा branch में जाके, request डालेगा email पे, और follow ups करेगा mobile pay. So he will try to use all the 3 avenues. So they are very smart, so they will kind of be on every touch point to get something or the other. Yeah. Then the obvious thing is KYC forgery. They will forge the KYC. So I'll just give you a simple thing. You have to understand that there is a policy which has become inactive, which is in a lapse state, which can be surrender, जिसमें के समझो 15 लाख रुपए पड़े हुए. What is required is the company wants that someone can come, do his KYC, legitimate KYC करके उसको उसके बैंक अकाउंट में पैसा चला जाएगा. So the way it starts is obviously profile modification. He will do a change in email, mobile, his own address. Here what is important is to obviously note that why profile modification is done, obviously because so that the old email, mobile अगर कुछ है उस पे कोई communication नहीं जाए. But yes, there is a catch here. Some companies, not all companies, have got a process in place wherein whenever there is a change, they inform or communicate to the customer on his own, on his old and the new communication address. Then there is a, they will obviously to use, so to transfer a money, there might be a bank account which would be mapped to that policy, but the company would expect him to give a new bank account for him to kind of transfer that money, or there would be obviously a request because the bank account would be old or the policy is old, hence they will request them to provide a fresh bank account detail. उसके लिए वो देगा बैंक अकाउंट का चेक, कैंसिल्ड चेक कॉपी दे देगा वो, which obviously would be forged, because while the cancelled check copy could be the policy is in the name of Rahul Jain and बैंक अकाउंट ओपन किया XYZ का, वो चेक कॉपी के ऊपर मॉडिफाई करके वो राहुल जैन का नाम डाल देगा, and he will give that as a supporting to say that boss, the amount has to be transferred to this bank account, because the transfer doesn't happen on the name, obviously it happens on the combination of the IFC and the bank account number. Yeah, then he will continuously follow up. Eventually the money will be transferred and he will take that money out immediately from the bank account. So this is all what will happen in that, which will eventually make him kind of make money being taken out of that policy, and for the company the loss has already happened. Okay, so this is how it operates, the overall modus operandi. Yeah, so what is the takeaway for the auditor? Anyone would want to highlight anything in the modus operandi which is broadly not covered? Because typically the modus operandi itself kind of, you know, helps you to look into the weak areas, or probably as an auditor to kind of, you know, improvise and when he or she is doing fraud analytics or auditing of, you know, fraud risk prone areas to kind of identify such frauds. Anyone would want to contribute anything which anyone has to say on each of these? Okay, I'll just move to the next slide. Yeah, wait. Yeah. Yeah. So what is the takeaway for the auditor? As an auditor or as someone who has been told to investigate, what is that, you know, he or she will look into, or probably if you are an auditor and the fraud has already been experienced, what is that you will do in future, obviously, to ensure that you are able to timely identify these and highlight them and report them? So first and foremost is, being an auditor, what is that you need to understand is that whether the company has got a policy on dormant account. So it has to be a documented policy, and one has to also ensure that the policy has been followed to the T. So अगर dormant account हो गया है तो dormant का marking timely हो गया है. So if a company has got a policy of ensuring that dormant should be made in 2 years, 1 year, 3 year, whatever, and obviously some of them are governed by regulations also which give them guidance कि कब किसको dormant या inactive mark करना है. So the policy on dormant account is important, and at the same time system पे भी वो ensure हो जाना चाहिए कि there is a process to ensure that these are marked as dormant, which is what someone has to look into as an auditor. That is something which is understanding the process and ensuring that the process is operating effectively. Customer communication is obviously very important. As I said in the previous slide, that certain companies, maybe not all, have a process in place. When there is a change in customers' contact, it is obviously updated to both the new and the old one. So at least with this, what will be ensured is that in case a customer जिसका कि पुराना एड्रेस पे कम्युनिकेशन गया, he can always come back, maybe just in time to kind of say that, boss, this is not something that I have requested, this is not a payout that I had requested. So it is very important to see what is the communications process, and if obviously the company or the client doesn't have that process in place, you have to kind of suggest them to have that process in place wherein it goes. But yes, the way it works is that at times, or in fact the fraudsters always ensure that the customer contact details, they know at most of the places what is the process being followed at the company. B, also that they know that some of these customers are actually inactive, and they know that उस पे message जाएगा, email जाएगा, वो bounce हो जाएगा. So while yes, we should obviously be looking into these policies, it is very important to understand the process. Also take note of the fact that fraudsters are always one step ahead of us. Yeah. Analysis of payout request. So this is something that you can pick up as a starting point when you do analytics, is obviously understand that what payout requests have come in inactive or dormant accounts, which didn't have transactions for a long time. So those are your starting point, wherein first thing first, what you do is obviously identify this. You can all decide on a threshold depending on the materiality of your client. There is no materiality which is defined anywhere. Obviously you need to understand your clients payout patterns, and of course payout patterns in such kind of accounts which do not have transactions for a long time. So analysis of payout request in inactive or dormant account is very critical. That would be your starting point. That would be your data, which is what you would work on. Then what you apply is obviously to see if there are any changes in contactability in these accounts, which mobile, email, whatever has changed. Next thing is do your own independent document verification. So obviously when a payout request would have come, it would have gone through a detailed due diligence process with whatever maker, checker and everything by the process owner. But yes, independently what we can do is we can also dig into the details more. So you can look into the bank account statement and see, or rather kind of go back and ask that if bank account has been opened recently, because typically fraudster kya karte ke they open a bank account, in a month or two they ensure that a fraud is done and the bank account is probably closed also. So that's how they do it. Dedupe analysis is very important. The data is already there within the company. So email, mobile, address, if at all it has been used of the employee, the agent who is working with the company, then you can kind of apply that, because we have also noticed that generally the employees or agents tend to use their own email and mobile and also bank account to kind of map it to these policies to do the fraud. Last thing is more of a process owner control, which I would want to talk about. It's more of a technology introduction which has happened in recent years. So generally large companies tend to do a penny drop. A penny drop is nothing but they put a rupee into your account, and what they get as an output is they get to know about the bank account in which that rupee has been transferred. So that is penny drop. There are a lot of vendors who help you to provide this service, wherein you can kind of penny drop and get to know what is the bank account, what is the bank account is in the name of whosoever it is, to see that hopefully Rahul Jain का पैसा Rahul Jain के अंदर ही गया है, not that Rahul Jain का पैसा किसी XYZ में गया हुआ है. Because if someone is obviously forging a check copy, then it is obviously going into a different bank account, and you will never ever come to know. So this is a good technology intervention which has happened, and I have also seen it being applied at lot many places. I'm sure you all would have also kind of come to know about this. Yeah. Anything from this? I mean, these are basically broad takeaways that I have kind of pointed out that should be there when you have these kind of frauds, because these are very common frauds, and when you do audits of payouts, claims, uh, all of these, you typically will encounter similar frauds or similar situations, and broadly this is the set of data or points that you can look into to check for any probable frauds. Yeah. Anyone would want to highlight anything here? I'll just
Rahul, at the
move
day
to
and at the time of the payout, I
yeah.
just wanted to ask, okay, do
Yeah.
you map all the payout with the agent bank account what you transfer it?
No. So the payout will eventually has to happen into a customer's account only.
But do you map it because whether it is an agent account or a customer's account? Because
No.
if
So
there
that
is
is so that is what I have said, that is a control which honestly as a control you can't have it. So it's like saying कि राहुल जैन के पॉलिसी में जब पे आउट जा रहा था तो भाविन का अकाउंट मैप हो गया फ्रॉडुलेंट तरीके से, बट टू हैव दैट कंट्रोल सो फॉर यू टू इंश्योर दैट वो पे आउट के टाइम पे वो एम्प्लॉय का डेटाबेस या एजेंट के डेटाबेस में जाके चेक करेगा कि ये तो भाविन का बैंक अकाउंट है, is very difficult. So obviously controls are never being put in that way, because it's like saying that 100 transactions को हर एक में वो कंट्रोल अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा. फ्रॉड तो नॉट नेसेसरी 100 में होगा, बट योर ओवरऑल टैट एंड एवरीथिंग विल गो फॉर द टॉस. सो डीड्यूप, honestly speaking, is something that we always expect or probably think that should be a good control built into the system, but at times it doesn't happen. Reason being very simple, that this is a control which will obviously take away the time, which will increase your overall TAT and everything. So just to identify that one fraud case, your 10,000, your 1 lakh, or whatever number of transactions will get impacted.
Because I was thinking about, can the two modules, since majority of the organization do use SAP, so at the time of the accounts payable, the agent bank account details are already there,
Right.
and at the time of making a payout, it is also through a SAP system, where through a different customer module. So can this two module don't link it same as earlier, which I was using as a tele version? Okay, this account is already there. So it does not give an indication, or it does not reflect or how many days prior whether that payment to a agent or to a policy holder, is there any change request which was happened? Because generally what I find it over your payout change request was done within 10-15 days, and after the transaction was done. So is there any inbuilt software or customized software is there, or SAP do help a change request once, and afterwards the change request of the bank account has been done, so after we take a two-phase authentication?
Yeah. So yes, Bhavin, of course, obviously all of that controls can be built, but it at the end of the day depends on the volume of transaction that a particular team or a processing team is because all of them are bound by certain timelines, and that's the resistance typically, or the challenge that we experience as an auditor, wherein they say that भाई तेरे एक केस के लिए मैं कैसे पूरा सिस्टम चेंज करूं, लिंकेजेस करूं, एंड यू वांट मी टू काइंड ऑफ बी, बिकॉज मेरे को वो तू तो एक फ्रॉड की बात कर रहा है, लेकिन जो जेन्युइन केस होगा वो आएगा, वो मेरे पीछे पड़ जाएगा कस्टमर, अरे मेरा पे आउट को क्यों टाइम लग रहा है. So that's typically the challenge, that it's not that it is not possible. Obviously, if you have everything on your systems, it is quite easier. Yes, we are evolving at some stages. This is happening, that integration is happening, to ensure that we are able to do something which is obviously possible and which does not impact any customer stat, because it is like saying that you're pushing some one customer a fraud into one account into every other customer stat will then obviously get impacted, because your process will obviously go for a toss then.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll just move to the next case study. Yeah. So this is a recent one, not quite recent, obviously, maybe a year or so. We've all heard about it in the newspapers. Yeah. So I'll be more than happy to have any inputs on this, because what I have done is basically I have gone through a document which is available in public domain, which basically highlights how this entire thing happened around the EPFO fund. So what was yeah, sorry.
Ram sir.
Yeah, Bhavin, good evening.
Good evening, sir. This is the fraud what we are discussing for a dummy bank account. So
Absolutely. Actually,
so
on the earlier slide where Rahul was
yeah.
talking about the frauds relating to KYC and all those things.
True. I was
There
just
is one more situation which happens many times in the banks. The same check number, which is a fraudulent check, comes to the bank for passing. The bank passes the check. And then after the real account holder also issues the same number of check. So what sort of internal control a bank can have in such cases where this sort of fraud takes place in a bank?
Yeah.
So
Right.
Rahul,
Yes.
hope we discuss this on our official group also. So you have provided same check, duplicate checks, it do comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what sort of, as an auditor, we can advise to the bank saying that, see, this is how you can prevent it. Because it has been happening for a long time now. After this mapping of checks and mirroring is facilities available, people are doing this actually. I don't know how they get the data of the bank customer having been issued such check containing such check number and all those things, and how they, signing is okay, they can duplicate. That is the software available. But as a bank auditor, when you go to a bank and then you have to advise to the bank saying that, okay, this is how you can prevent this fraud. So what sort of things we can, think on which lines actually, if you come across any such thing?
Yeah, definitely. So on this, I wanted to say, Ram sir, के यहाँ पे, if you know, from January onwards, there is a two-phase authentication when you issue a check. So you have to inform it to the bank.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Bhavin, see, authentication is one thing actually. The person who is issuing a check,
yes, he has to inform.
See, nowadays, of course, because of this digital economy, the issuing of checks has almost gone now. But there was a time actually where this sort of fraud used to happen in many of the banks, but the banks would not be reporting this. They will, if a customer is caught off the bank, then they will, give the money back to the customer actually. But this fraud would not come in public domain.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I encounter or experience is obviously there are a lot of weak processes, KYC weak processes with the banks also, because what we experience is generally, अगर I mean, I'll just give you an example. मैंने जो आप लोग को लास्ट में वो penny drop वाला बताया था, जिसमें मैंने बोला था कि at least penny drop will ensure that आप जिस अकाउंट में पैसा डाल रहे हो वो पॉलिसी होल्डर भी वही है. But we encountered something. I was a little surprised last few weeks back when we found through our industry experience कि एक बंदे ने राहुल जैन के नाम का अकाउंट समझो एक्स बैंक में जाके राहुल जैन के फेक केवाईसी पे आई थिंक सो इन पर्सन वेरिफिकेशन हुआ नहीं रहेगा, केवाईसी बराबर से लिया नहीं, व्हाटएवर दे वर एबल टू ओपन एन अकाउंट. सो अल्टीमेटली राहुल जैन का नाम का ही अकाउंट ओपन हुआ, मेरे बंदे ने समझो पेनी ड्रॉप किया, उसको भी दिखा ओ वाओ दिस इज मैचिंग, राहुल जैन दोनों मैच हो रहा है. ही वाज एबल टू मूव द फंड्स. So I mean, fraudsters are way step ahead of us to know about all these things. If you have introduced one more control, they will kind of override that control also. Earlier they were knowing एक forged check copy खाली दे दूंगा, मेरा पैसा निकल जाएगा and I will get it into my account. Then they got to know नहीं भैया ये लोग तो चेक करते हैं कि सामने वाला बैंक अकाउंट कौन सा है, ये तो अगर मिसमैच मिल गया इनको तो they will stop the payout. So now they've gone one step ahead. They're trying to find out banks which has got weak KYC processes and all of that, and then they kind of create a bank account and they ensure that was Rahul Jain का पैसा Rahul Jain में चला गया.
Absolutely, absolutely, Rahul. Very good.
Yeah. So this one is on the EPFO thing. Just quickly I'll go through because in the interest of time we are right now at 6:45.
Can I interrupt here?
Yeah.
So better control in such cases is, income tax has introduced a beautiful concept by making it PAN linked. So if your refund is going to the particular PAN account, PAN number, and bank account is not linked with that PAN number, then refund will not go through. So you have to, there is a process that they have designed for that thing. These kind of processes, if can be brought into general, in NBFCs or insurance companies, that will be a great, that will be a step ahead.
Yeah, so basically a PAN linked bank account and obviously an Aadhaar PAN linking and all of those controls you're saying.
Not Aadhaar, Aadhaar is obviously linked. I'm saying your bank account has to have that PAN number. For example, in my personal case, I had two accounts with ICICI Bank. So in old good days, ICICI did not. One was student account which I am having from past 22 years.
Okay.
So in one bank had not linked my PAN number, and in another which was a salary account, my PAN number was linked.
Okay.
So I wanted to keep my saving accounts separately. So I always used to give my student account as a refund account for refund. Whenever, so I got a notice saying that your account is not linked with your PAN. So go and get it linked or give an alternate account where your PAN is linked. So that is the concept which one should target to, desire to, that is ultimate control.
Right.
Very right,
But
very right, Anilji.
Yeah.
Very right, Anilji.
Yes.
But are you aware actually how this control has come about?
No.
There was a fraud in RBI. There was a fraud in RBI.
Okay.
In good olden days, when the RBI used to issue the refund checks of the income tax refund.
No, income tax. Yes, there was a fraud in income tax of 16 crore rupees, in which they used to issue these checks in other name. Those frauds still happens. Recently, in last week, there was a report that 263 crore rupees fraud has taken place.
Yeah. So that the linking of PAN has come as a control to that sort of problem actually.
That is true, but that is ultimate control, no? In spite of penny dropping, etc. See, there could be two Rahul Jains also, no?
So that is there. Absolutely right.
But that the challenge is, what PAN is obviously not mandatory, and asking everyone would not obviously have a PAN. So that's the problem.
No, but there are many issues, Rahul. Actually, I had been doing the bank audit of one of the banks, where four burqa-clad lady came along with their husband, and the bank manager said, "Where is your photograph? I require the photograph along with your PAN card." So they give the PAN card to him. Then he said, "These photos are not visible properly, so you have to give a photograph which is visible." So the husband tells, we cannot show the face of our wife. So we do not take such photographs. Then he said, "I will not open the account in the name of your wife's name." Then he said, "Okay, you open the account in my name." Then he said, the bank manager asked him, "Okay, you give your KYC documents." The guy came out with 4 PAN cards having different names. So there is no limit of such
just too many things. Yeah.
One person having four PAN number actually.
Yeah. The biggest challenge I feel is, at times for certain things you can't just push a customer, because problem क्या होता है, हम लोग एक fraud के हिसाब से हम लोग जब discussion करते हैं हम लोग बोलते हैं एक fraud के लिए हम लोग ये control डालेंगे, but this is like saying that you want to implement on whatever percentage, which is just a very minute percentage, and pushing other clients and mandating them to do certain things. So that's a challenge that every company or corporate, typically has, which is why there continues to be certain loopholes for fraudsters to kind of take advantage. That's what I have a personal feeling. Yeah. So we'll just go through this one. So this happened obviously during the lockdown period. What I have, kind of gone through that document and understand is that the EPFO records would obviously have records of companies and also the employees. So there were certain companies which were shut or which were closed as per EPFO records. There weren't anything in those companies as employees. There were no employees in those companies. Probably the employees who would have been there, part of the company, would have moved out to some other company and kind of opened their account or their PF, would have updated their PF records and all. So what these, so this fraud was basically done within the system by certain employees. That was the biggest risk here, a collusion risk. What was done is basically migrant workers, or typically during the first lockdown, were being lured, to open bank account and also PF account with the authority by submitting obviously their KYC and Aadhaar and all of that. They were given some commission also just to lure them to open bank account and PF account. These migrant workers were then, kind of, once their PF accounts were opened, they were added or, mapped as employees of companies which were dormant as per EPFO records. So EPFO records के हिसाब से समझो एक कंपनी होगी जो कि 5 साल पहले बंद हो गई या 7 साल पहले बंद हो गई, उसमें through obviously certain overriding controls that these employees had, they used all of that and kind of mapped these PF accounts into those companies. They made them show as employees of these companies, and then what they have done is basically, so this was not a fraud into a dormant or a, there cannot be an EPFO, this one आपका EPF account कभी dormant नहीं हो सकता है. Dormant ऐसे हो सकता है, उनका कोई dormant वाला marking वाला concept नहीं होएगा, but it could be the other way around, as in that this was here basically the companies were dormant or they were shut. Migrant workers are obviously added. So every company, as part of the reconciliation process, they identify certain credits which they are at times not able to apply. मतलब पैसा तो भर के आता है ये सब EPFO बोलो या सारी companies में. Then at the end of the day, obviously the process is basically receipt, reconcile and account for it. So receipt तो हो गया. अभी reconciliation के time पे basically there would be certain unreconciled items which was lying in a EPFO pool as a credit, and to move that credit to a PF account, obviously to map that credit to some account which is a genuine account, obviously agar hoga to. So there are certain exclusive provisions in the system which are obviously available only to certain hierarchy of individuals within the PF organization. So what they've done is they've used these unidentified credits, I can call them out, which were part of the reconciliation item. They use these credit and then they have shown that credit, they moved that credit to the employees which were created in the PF records. Dummy जो create किया था उनकी वो सारा पैसा उसमें move हो गया. Then what they've done is that and this was a pan India fraud, different locations से फिर PF withdrawal request आई थी. PF withdrawal request obviously is subject to a lot of things, but as we would all know that during the lockdown, government had done certain relaxations on PF withdrawals as well. So they created request maybe within 3 lakhs is what they kind of use. They've used some 800 odd accounts. They've created some 800 odd accounts to move unreconciled credits into these accounts and then submit fake claim request. and obviously basis that वो migrant worker जो भी उसके account में जो पैसा चला गया होगा, and they would have obviously withdrawn that amount by giving him whatever commission. So that was the overall modus operandi which was used to take out funds. Basically, the unreconciled amount which was lying in the EPFO pool. Yeah, I'll just move to the. So what made it possible? As I said, that it was obviously because of the relaxation in rules. Rules relax हो गए थे. There was a surge in the withdrawal request. Somehow genuine request इतनी आने लग गई तो किसी को पता भी नहीं चलता है कि थोड़ी non genuine request mix हो गई. So they used all of that as an opportunity to create that. To manage this surge, government or probably the authority had kind of given additional responsibility at certain hierarchy level to the employees to ensure that ये सारा PF request जितनी भी आती है इसको timely process करो, seamlessly process करो, don't do the way we have been doing it in the past. We've been doing a lot of due diligence and all of that, ensure that there is a seamless processing of these withdrawal requests. So all of these, created that avenue for them to kind of take that money out of it. Some of the employees जिनके ऊपर ज़्यादा responsibility थी, what they've done is they've compromised their password, given it to people down the level. अभी 10 बजे बैठ के कौन ओके देगा, अप्रूव करेगा, 11 बजे बैठ के कौन करेगा. So then they compromise their password and all of that due to remote working, because obviously they were not coming to office. So all of that, kind of was compromised, and there was collusion across, नीचे से लेके ऊपर तक, everyone was part of this to ensure that there is a, seamless processing and obviously evasion, किसी को पता ना चले. So this is how it was made possible. Yeah. Anyone till now here, any questions that on this?
Rahul, was this fraud found out by the internal auditor, or it was on account of
Yeah. So
computer audit?
No,
IT
so
audit.
this was not IT audit. This was found when there was an internal audit which happened at the authority sometime last year, as part of the internal audit when they were doing reconciliation of the unidentified credits. So there is obviously that money which is lying when an internal audit, obviously there was some whistleblower thing which kind of came in, but to get into all these things and kind of identify the root cause, ye kaise hua, it all was discovered when an internal audit happened at the authority. Yeah.
Good. So that is the job of internal audit, right?
Yeah. So it was something which was discovered during an internal audit. Yeah.
Okay, we can move forward.
So I'll just, I'm just taking it to the next slide. Yeah. So what is the takeaway? Obviously, review of access controls, logs. We all obviously have to do that. The way we do it is there are many mechanisms for us to kind of review that. So when we obviously get the access control logs, while I know that these are obviously processed through specific systems by specific individuals, there are a lot of details that you find in the access log. There are IP addresses. Obviously, if the IP addresses are dynamic, then it would be difficult, but obviously if they are fixed, then obviously you can find them out. You can also see if a particular person has been absent on a particular day, but if his system was still used on that day, giving a suspicion around who would have obviously accessed that system. So access control is very critical, that one should obviously look into. The reconciliation process, that's very, very important. Every company has a process of reconciling unidentified credits that are appearing in the bank accounts. In fact, statutory auditors themselves comment on this item, that what is the aging of this, why is that you are not able to map these credits to the right accounts, to the right policies. So obviously there is a process around it. So you need to understand the process around it, because at sometimes a weak process could lead on a genuine credit belonging to A being given to B, and B would obviously take that money out. So that overall process of how you identify, how you report or map, obviously that has to be supported by evidences to ensure that obviously the credit is being applied to the right person is what is very critical when we obviously look into reconciliation. Segregation of duties is very critical at times when you have been obviously given that additional responsibility, but at the end of the day everyone has to ensure that there is a segregation of duty, there is a maker, a different maker, there is a different checker to do all that, not that one person get both the accesses and he is able to kind of override the system and process certain things. So SOD is very important. Exception handling process is very critical because at times kya hota hai, to manage the flow of requests, certain exceptions are given. So we need to understand whenever we are doing any internal audit that whether any waiver, any exceptions were given by the management. We have to obviously ask the process owner and also obviously to the management to understand if there was any exceptions which was given, why they were given, what was the grounds of it. We need to ensure that there is appropriate documentation and it has been followed in that way. So that is something also what we need to kind of look into. Yeah. You can interrupt me. I'm just moving a little fast because given the time constraint that we have here. Yeah. The next one, as we had one, discussed right at the start. This is around the spurious calls that all of us get. So this is typically part of some group or racket who run call centers. They are generally run by individuals or groups, who were earlier part of some insurance company or they were part of some channel or someone who was associated obviously with an insurance company who obviously got data and everything. So insurance में ये generally ज़्यादा देखने को मिलता है because insurance, as you all know, is split up into multiple distribution channel. There are brokers who sell insurance, there are banks who sell insurance, there are agency channels who sell insurance. एक से नहीं लेगा तो दूसरे के पास जाएगा, दूसरे के पास नहीं तो तीसरे के पास जाएगा, नहीं तो लास्ट में पॉलिसी बाजार जाएगा, रेट कंपेयर करेगा और पॉलिसी खरीद लेगा. तो अपना एक आदमी का डेटा मतलब पूरी दुनिया में घूम रहा है. So that is one of the root cause that you get all these calls. So when we all say that मेरा data आया कैसे, we would have obviously kind of कहीं ना कहीं पे we would have left our footprint in any of these where through which they would have at least got our contact, even if not our details but at least our contact to contact us and ensure that we get lured by something and we compromise certain things. Here basically these call centers se kya hota hai, they do calling to remind the customers about their payments due. During the pandemic this was a very common area of fraud which happened, and predominantly it happened because we were all into that digital mode. So kya hota tha कि आपको फोन आता था, आप बोलते थे कि भैया ब्रांच तो बंद है, मेरे को प्रीमियम पे करनी है सर आपकी प्रीमियम. सो इफ द वन हु वुड ऑब्वियसली हैव अ डेटा will be very confident and tell sir आपका 50,000 rupees बाकी है, ये डेट है, वो डेट है, and everything. He would give you everything because he has the data, and there would be someone who would obviously not have the data but who would be trying to get into your personal details for some other issue. So this is how they kind of call you. They then after the calling is done they give you a payment link also. आप देखोगे अरे HDFCL या ये कोटक या ये एक्सिस या ऐसे आपको दिखेगा वो, and you will be lured, or you will just click on the link because what we want is obviously ease. At the end of the day we are all now kind of used to getting things easier to be done. So the payment link you get it which looks very similar to what you are going to otherwise make genuine payment to. Then you get email confirmation also, acknowledgement also. So all of this makes you feel that boss this is all genuine. So that's very it's difficult to trace at times these ones. Yeah. So what made it possible, obviously data being stolen, collusion is obviously one of the reasons through which you get the data. You are able to get the data. Customer awareness, weak customer awareness on the part of the payee company. to help customers go. If you try and send out regular messages making them aware, at least you'll be able to prevent, if not in all the cases, at least in some of the cases of the customer who would have read through the messages. There are a lot of customers who are just ignorant about too much of messages and emailing which is being received. Weak KYC control, this is a very critical aspect that we got to know. So आपने लिंक आई, आपने लिंक पे गए, आपने पेमेंट भी कर दिया. वो लिंक बेसिकली इज अ पेमेंट गेटवे का लिंक. पेमेंट एग्रीगेटर्स लाइक पेनीमो, रेजर पे, bill pay, bill desk, they are all regulated by RBI under payment web aggregator regulations. Okay, so while they are regulated by RBI, but at the end of the day, किसी merchant को onboard करना है वो payment aggregator को, so it all depends on his own internal policies. While RBI has put in place that you need to ensure that आपका merchant जो है वो आपको KYC देगा, then only you allow him to go ahead. But these aggregators, in light of the business that they want to do, at times there are a lot of weak controls at their end while they onboard a merchant. So Rahul Jain came to Razorpay and said, I want to create a link of say abcdbank.com. He will allow you to create that link. You use that link, send it to that set of customers with whom you have spoken to, asking them to make payment. They will go on to that link and obviously make the payment. So this is a weak KYC on the part of payment aggregators. There are too many payment aggregators and they are growing as part of the fintech ecosystem that we have. So when you are obviously auditing payment aggregators as well, please look at these aspects around KYC, how KYC of a merchant is done. राहुल जैन आया, वो लिंक या जो क्रिएट कर रहा है वो कोटक का क्रिएट कर रहा है, एक्सिस का क्रिएट कर रहा है, आईसीआईसीआई का क्रिएट कर रहा है, इसका क्रिएट कर रहा है, वो हाउ इज दैट दे आर अलाउिंग ऑल ऑफ दैट? That's a very key issue that should obviously be obviously RBI also looks into this when they get a lot of complaints. Creation of fake domains, GoDaddy पे जाओ और abcd.com, ICICI ये.com वो.com आप बना सकते हो, which only makes you believe that ये genuine source से आया तो भैया मैं यूज कर लेता हूँ ये SMS ये email पेमेंट करने के लिए. So that is what makes it possible. Yeah. So takeaway for the auditors. So largely, when I'm talking about the possibility as to how they have happened, I'm trying to cover also quickly in terms of what led to those. So probably what those should be the areas which are relevant for us to look into. So customer data security is obviously very important. So when you are doing audits of contact centers for a client or a company, you need to ensure and see that how strong access controls they have, whether they are able to take out the data, whether they are able to share that data with anyone. तो जब हम इंटरनल ऑडिट करते हैं एक वेंडर की, एक थर्ड पार्टी वेंडर की जो एक कंपनी का कॉल सेंटर है, कॉन्टैक्ट सेंटर है, व्हाटएवर, वी नीड टू सी टू इट दैट बॉस दे आर हैविंग अप्रोप्रिएट प्रोसेसेस एंड सिस्टम्स इन प्लेस दैट वहां पे किसी कंपनी का या अपने क्लाइंट का डेटा बाहर लीक नहीं हो सकता है. एटलीस्ट थ्रू their processes and their systems it should not get leaked. If someone is obviously overriding all of that and doing that is obviously something which is uncontrollable, you can't do that, but at least basic they have those controls in place. We have tried audit procedures can also include when you have a regular paying customers, you suddenly feel that why is this customer not paying? So you can just do a customer calling on these set of customers who have not paid their dues to understand that what is the reason for that. Is it a genuine non-payment, or obviously has he fallen prey to some email, some message which had come from a fake domain, or and he has actually paid that? So that could be one of the identifiers. KYC controls that I have told, when you are doing an audit of the payment gateways or payment aggregators, you should obviously look into it. The last one is purely customer awareness being created by the company. So how much of awareness, email, SMS that they are creating, giving them genuine sources, legitimate sources through which they should make their payments is very critical, is something that everyone should look at it. This basically gives you a comfort that at least from the company from its side is doing something to prevent and create awareness, as every other regulator is doing it on television or any other media, so is the company also doing that. Yeah. Yeah, so that was the last case study. Anything on this? Any questions?
From my
Yeah,
side,
so
no. No.
yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, I'll just move to the next slide. So this is basically overall summary of, you know, what typically should be part of the fraud prevention and detection mechanism that every professional or as an auditor that we should look for when we are reviewing the fraud risk at any of the organization as part of the audit, internal audit that we do, or any risk management review that we are doing. So point number 1, 2, 3 are more of a, you know, kind of deterrence, which is basically around anti-fraud policies, bribery policies. What is so basically point number 1, 2, 3 is all about
I think some
की
network issue.
मैट्रिक्स के क्या कौन से इंस्टेंस पे कौन से वाले फ्रॉड पे what is the action that you would take, what is the frequency, whether there are disciplinary panels which are happening regularly, what is the tone at the top in terms of whether there is a regular disciplinary panel which is happening and there are actions which are taken against the employees. Hopefully there are no waivers, there are no exceptions which are being done. So all of these have to be looked into. What is the level of fraud awareness that the company is creating? You know, there are fraud awareness sessions which are done with the employees. There are a lot of these, you know, training modules, learning modules, quiz, and everything that the company is doing with their employees. What is the fraud awareness that they do with their vendors? To kind of make them also part of the anti-fraud culture of the company कि भैया जब ऐसा ऐसा fraud मेरी company में होता है तो this is the action that we take, and you as a vendor, if I find you that you have done so and such fraud, I will take a decision in terms of terminating you, giving you a warning, whatever. So hopefully all of that is happening, or if not that is happening, that is something that the company and the client has to do. That will kind of create a culture which will kind of act as a deterrent for them, or to not, you know, get into these practices. So point 1, 2, 3 is all about, you know, fraud deterrence, either to prevent, you know, or do all of these. 5, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which is fraud risk assessment controls, establishing controls, monitoring controls, reporting, is something that we all look into when we obviously do the audit. So point number 4, predominantly fraud risk assessment. So A, identify the list of processes which would be prone to frauds. Okay, so we need to create a list of processes which would obviously be prone to fraud. So you know, we all think about the fact that only financial risk is a fraud. You know, at the end of the day, for some of the company, reputation damage can also be a fraud. So mis-selling at the end of the day, I'll tell you, is not a financial risk for the company. Let me tell you, because he has invested into a product which obviously he was not made aware of. He put in his money, he was not guided properly, he was misguided, and eventually the customer comes with a complaint. What as an organization you have to do is obviously refund back that money. But what is more of a risk, there is obviously a reputation risk which is attached to it. So don't just look at financial risk as the only parameter for, you know, doing a fraud risk assessment. So when you identify list of processes, go beyond financial risk. Also think about the reputation risk which is associated with any fraud that may happen. Eventually any fraud which happens is obviously a reputation damage to the organization. But yes, I mean, certain things are very critical from a reputation perspective and might not have any financial impact. So very critical to, while you're doing a fraud risk assessment, to, you know, map the processes, to map the right risk if a fraud has to happen, and ensure that we create that kind of a repository as part of the process. So when you do obviously a when you prepare a risk control matrix, when you're doing a risk assessment, you need to very clearly document that this process at this place has got this fraud risk. There is obviously mitigant in place, or there aren't any mitigant in place, and obviously test of controls that would obviously follow that. So fraud risk assessment will obviously lead to identifying gaps, control gaps, and asking the organization or the client to put those controls in place. Then once the controls are being put in place, obviously it is necessary to kind of monitor them. Monitoring can be done by two teams. Obviously, some organizations do it as part of their process, so more or less kind of aligned to the process to have early fraud indicators, or whatever we can call it as, and elsewhere it is obviously part of the internal audit function or the fraud risk management function to look into it. Yeah. Seventh is reporting. Once obviously you have monitoring agar ho raha hai, to naturally exceptions have to be listed out, have to be given, placed and reported. Ensure that reporting is happening, and reporting is happening for the sake of ensuring that there is a disciplinary matrix in place, and the disciplinary matrix is something which is used by the disciplinary panel to take action against the employee. So overall, this entire fraud culture is obviously operating effectively, right from framing the policy, framing processes, controls, and at the end by actioning wherever fraud instances have been identified. Because having all of that and at the end of the day not taking any action will not set a right culture within the organization. So actioning is also equally important. And review of controls is nothing but obviously as you learn and evolve through the fraud experiences, you go back and you start with step number 4, 5, 6 again. As you experience fraud, you go back, you strengthen your processes, you strengthen your controls, and that's how you again start the cycle. So that's a broad overview in terms of how this overall prevention and detection mechanism should work. What is that we should be looking into, asking information about when we are doing the reviews. Yeah. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah, so controls obviously part of the respective function or respective process owner. What is that we as an auditor should obviously be looking into. So policies and procedures obviously will form part of any internal audit that we do. Naturally, I mean, that's the starting point for each one of us as an auditor. So to assess obviously the level of internal controls that the organization has got. So policies and procedures are very important. Hopefully appropriate processes, critical processes are all documented, and they are documented right up to the T in terms of giving clear responsibilities as to who is going to do what. Exception handling process should also be there wherever it is known that there could be exceptions. Okay, so policies and procedures should ensure all of that is in place. Segregation of duties, yeah, conflicting rules should obviously avoid. Giving you an example, maker checker, while we all call it as maker checker, if assuming a process has got some guy doing an activity, so in insurance typically what happens is you give your claims which are received obviously go through an investigation process also. Industry experience had that there in between it was observed that there could be an individual who is involved in the process. So the process should be built such that there is a guy who is obviously identifying cases which are to be investigated. B, that guy is obviously also whether that guy is also responsible for selecting the investigator who has to be given these cases, and at the end he is also responsible for ensuring that the invoices or the bills of these investigators are cleared. So that's so if a same guy is doing all these three activities, is what is obviously something which should strike your mind. A conflict obviously that एक ही बंदा भैया वो ही select करेगा किसको, because investigation is very critical process in claims, okay, because this is the investigator's opinion. The company has to kind of decide whether to proceed ahead to honor or not to honor the claim. So being a very critical process, obviously if you believe that वो process में ही इतना बड़ा risk है कि segregation of duties किया नहीं, and probably if one of your individual is involved with them, you are taken for a complete toss. A small example to help you understand segregation of duties, but we all understand how segregation of duties is important, because in an entire chain of process you should naturally have every person adding some value and should be able to identify what the other guy has failed to identify or point out as an error. So it's part of every audit that we do, not that you look at it just purely from a fraud perspective. But yeah, I mean, all of you would have experienced at times जब fraud होता है और internal बंदा fraud करता है, तो one of the root causes is segregation of duties, you know. That's something that we all experience, you know. Data security I have been talking about in the few previous slides as well. So how critical is your information, whether there is appropriate process in place to transfer data, to ensure that the data, if it goes out of your organization and is lying with someone else, it is secured with him, not that there is some misuse or weak controls at that end to kind of giving a possibility of data leakage. Job rotations, yeah, it's a very, you know, debatable thing. I would want some views or opinions on this, because, you know, job rotations typically is a very good thing to ask for कि भैया एक बंदा एक process में कोई critical process है, which is obviously a decisioning process, and a failure of that would obviously lead to larger loss for the organization. Shouldn't we kind of move that guy out of that function after maybe 3 years, 5 years job rotations? So I don't know, anyone has got any view on job rotations or any challenge that one feels around job rotations? Okay, just
Rahul,
yeah,
Rahul,
yeah,
if you remember this Punjab National Bank fraud,
yeah,
which took place in respect of this guy who is absconding now, Mehul Shah and his
right,
party,
yeah.
it came because of the job rotation only.
It came because of job rotation, or would you want to say segregation of duties?
No, 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 no. What used to happen is that the guy who used to sanction these letters, no, he was probably retired and a new guy had come, and when
Okay, and
it
the
came
new
for
guy
his
kind of,
approval,
yeah,
when it came for his approval, he was not aware of the
right,
procedure actually. So he went to his seniors, and then
right,
it came
right,
out.
right, right.
This has been going on for a long
Yeah,
time. The
yeah. So
new person who came in the job. Yeah,
yeah,
yes.
so that was very coincidental, you know, कि वो retire हो गया इसलिए कोई नया बंदा है.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
yeah, but
this fraud came out because of the job rotation only.
yeah, so that's where the relevance of job rotations actually come out, you
Absolutely.
know. So
These
yeah,
systems which have been devised long back, I think they are time tested actually. They are based on the
yeah,
experience. Whether it is segregation of duties, whether it is job rotation, whether it is authority metrics or data security, we are seeing every day actually what is happening.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so job rotation is, yes, obviously very critical.
absolutely.
There are
12,000
challenges,
crores.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Then authority matrix approvals, obviously there has to be a approval matrix in place. We need to see if the approval matrix obviously has been implemented in the system, not that it is out of the system. It is on email, and every individual in that entire value chain is aware about the fact that whose approval is required to go ahead and process something. So that is how important authority matrix also is, and ensure that these authority matrix are obviously signed off by senior guys. So you need to ensure that the approvals are around these matrices, you know, are signed off by the higher authority. So please insist on that as well. Transaction or vendor due diligence is more around the fact that when you are onboarding any particular vendor, who is a critical part of that entire process, which you have also highlighted as something which is prone to a fraud risk as well. So ensure that there is a appropriate background verification being done for that vendor, who are part of these vendors, as in the employees, the management, and whosoever are. Because at times what happens is, if in the industry we've seen, you know, there are vendors who play a very critical role, but maybe they are not so bigger organizations. But if they are terminated at one place, you know, they come back to that same place with some other names, with some other name, maybe same operating from the same location, सारा डेटा चेंज करके, बट वही वेंडर है जो अल्टीमेटली काम कर रहा है. सो दैट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट यू डू अ वेंडर ड्यू डिलिजेंस व्हेन यू ऑनबोर्ड देम. सो मे बी and also subsequently supported by mystery shopping of these vendors as well, which can be done. So that's part of the vendor due diligence, because as we all know, outsourcing is gaining a lot of importance across organizations. A lot of processes are being outsourced. So when you outsource, obviously your risk of giving your process, your information, your details with an external person becomes very important. And how do you then ensure that you manage that risk? Obviously you have to do all of these due diligence on a regular basis, and more specifically when you are onboarding a vendor, only not to find it out later on that भैया इसका due diligence किया होता हमने starting में, तो probably ये fraud भी नहीं होता वैसे. Yeah. Next one is monitoring, or probably some of the aspects that we can look into when we are doing analysis on, you know, customer data, to find out any probable fraud in any particular transaction which has happened in the customer's account, a customer's policy. So a lot of parameters. This is not an exhaustive list. Obviously the list is something which would be bigger, and some of you can also contribute if you can. What generally that we look into is, obviously a customer profile is very important. So in insurance, I'll just give you an idea in terms of, there are certain products which are, you know, there are certain risk profile which are mapped to certain products, low risk, high risk, medium risk, and all of that. And you also need to understand what kind of a customer is buying that kind of a product. So if you feel that there is any mismatch, a senior citizen buying a ULIP, or a, you know, someone buying a term insurance right at the age of 60, yeah, whatever is the last age which is required to get into a policy. So some of these are mismatches that obviously one should kind of, you know, outliers that someone should look into when they are taking a customer data. This is something very important. Geography, as you experience, please speak to people. You can also, you know, read through at many places. There are certain locations which are called out as negative locations because a lot of frauds happen in those locations. Company also in their own databases have marked certain locations to be negative locations, where they either don't entertain any business, or if any business is coming through that location, obviously they do a lot of due diligence around whatever has been onboarded. B, obviously when I say geography, so negative locations ke beyond, you can also look into a customer who is not in India, obviously is an NRI. So understand that process ke, how has that customer been onboarded, and NRI customer been onboarded, या कोई NRI customer के पॉलिसी में या अकाउंट में कुछ पे आउट का रिक्वेस्ट आया है, पैसा विड्रॉल का रिक्वेस्ट आया है, how true can that be, how genuine that can be. So these are outliers that one should look at. Touch points, obviously we have got multiple touch points now. You can, as a customer, come to a branch, you can come through email touch point, website, and all of that. So understand, branch obviously is a physical kind of a touch point. So naturally thoda hesitance रहता है. But I have also witnessed, you know, at times companies have also kind of given a process wherein they allow, or on certain exceptions, to ask a non-walk-in customer with some POA, वो पावर ऑफ अटॉर्नी कस्टमर से लेके आ जाएगा, बोलेगा वो बीमार है, वो ऐसा है वैसा है, इसीलिए वो आ नहीं सका, वो वॉक इन नहीं है. एंड यू हैव अ सेट अप दैट पॉलिसी बिकॉज senior citizens hai, they may obviously not come out, and all of these policies, some of them were invented during this COVID era as well, which kind of, senior citizens don't move out of the house, so you can allow someone coming on their behalf to the branch and giving a request. Digital touch points, faceless touch points, very easier, risk-prone touch points. So that can obviously be a focus area for all of you when you are obviously auditing data, to see or look at the touch points through which these requests are coming. Sales personnel or agent profiling, obviously you've got the data with you. New agent, vintage hai, काफी time से है, any past instances of anything unusual with that employee. Background verification में जो employees का negative आता है, I mean whether, or cases where background verification could not be done. There are cases where obviously for certain reason background verification is not possible, but still companies at times take call to go ahead and kind of onboard those customers. Obviously there are genuine reasons for that not happening, but if that is the case, then obviously you need to look at the background verification report of a particular employee, because at times frauds, as I've said, are committed internally by your own employees. Then obviously you need to look at their background, rather than after the fraud has been discovered, you go back and you find out the root cause and you get all of that data and everything. Yeah. Publicly available databases, yeah, I mean, a lot of companies' processes are linked to PAN databases, Aadhaar databases. You would all be knowing Aadhaar database में information आता है, but उसमें क्या आता है? They just give you your, gender, and they give you your age bracket. Nothing beyond that, so that's a very limited information, but at times that can also be useful. When actually a fraud happens, what I have also noticed when the investigation happens, somehow people obviously go to social media sites and find out on facial, ये बंदा अगर किसी के साथ Facebook पे linked है, इसके साथ इस पे linked है, he's linked to this person and all of that. So these are few pointers that kind of you can look into when you are actually investigating a fraud. Obviously not in every case when you are analyzing a data or you're doing an audit, obviously not at that time, but when you have come to a place or a conclusion wherein आपने एक बड़ा data लिया, you applied a lot of common checks or analytics on that, on some of the above parameters, and you come to a smaller database. On that, then you kind of get into an investigation mode, because you can't obviously do a fraud risk audit on the entire set of data that you have. You obviously have to identify and bring it to one position. एक outlier data आपको लाना पड़ेगा जिसको आपको analyze करना है finally, and then you can apply more parameters to that data set. Concurrent data analytics is more of a framework that we can sell, or probably you can go and sell it to any client. Honestly speaking, it's like saying that, boss, any large organization typically has either an in-house concurrent audit team, or obviously they look for outside for having a concurrent audit for some of the key risks that they would have, obviously, which would also indicate fraud risk prone areas like payouts, claims. They would obviously focus on these to ensure that, boss, hopefully we are not having any unusual things here. Customer complaints and whistleblower complaints obviously are a very key touch point. So not that customer ने complain कर दिया fraud हो गया, वो नहीं बोल रहा, not from that perspective. I'm saying more from a perspective that you have got your customers complaint. So link the entire set of data. So when you're analyzing a particular process, go back and view and use the customer complaints ka data point to understand if there are customers who have complained against a particular sales personnel, whether there is कुछ behavior है कि ये sales वाले के against में ज्यादा complaints है, ये region में ज्यादा complaint है, ये branch में ज्यादा complaint है, ये agent के against में ज्यादा complaint है, ये product में ज्यादा है. So that will kind of give you a view around whether there is anything fishy at any one of these places. So customer complaints, whistleblower complaints generally जब भी आती है, it actually takes shape of an investigation. Honestly, it's not something that you can apply to a transaction or to some audit that we do. Whistleblower complaints typically take a shape of basically इन्वेस्टिगेशन में ज़्यादा हेल्पफुल होती है. बट येस, यू कैन ऑलवेज आस्क देम as a starting point whether there have been any whistleblower complaints which could impact your audit. So if there is a whistleblower complaint against a particular process owner, obviously then it has to be taken note of, because that gives you a background that भैया इधर ये अगर process owner के against में कोई whistleblower complaint है तो हो सकता है at a transaction level also there could be a issue. Yes, you can very categorically ask them that whether it is more of a behavioral related issue or it is, you know, around something what he was doing as in his job responsibilities. So this is all you know, cohort of things that we can apply or use when we are obviously doing. These are some of the analytics pointer. Anyone would want to add any of this in case I'm missing out anything, because there is a very exhaustive list, but I have tried to cover from multiple perspectives. In addition to what, you know, I have already discussed some of them in the past case studies that we had. Yeah. Okay. I'll just maybe move to the next one. Yeah. So this is the regulatory expectations and reporting. So, you know, here I'll need one help. Maybe at the end I'll just ask a few. So broadly, I have seen, you know, my experience के regulatory expectations क्या होते हैं. It all starts with, you know, laying down guidelines. एक circular आएगा बोलेगा कि anti fraud framework बनाओ. Anti fraud framework में they will give you a guidance कि आपको क्या क्या होना चाहिए. You know, you should have anti fraud policies, anti fraud culture, anti bribery policy, whistleblower mechanism, what is that you do on fraud monitoring. So all of that is part of the framework that they expect the companies to do. So that's the regulatory expectations around what is required. So obviously you need to have all of these in place, because then otherwise if you're not having this, then obviously the risk is not complying to the regulatory requirement. And last is, of course, but reporting of the frauds, because every regulator is interested to know what kind of fraud have happened. Yeah, there are certain thresholds also which have been kind of, you know, listed basis the reporting frequency, that if you have frauds of so and such value, there are detailed ones. Then you need to report it quarterly, monthly, and all of that. Companies Act as very categorically states that the auditor has to report the fraud to the board, to the audit committee, and the central government. This is, I believe, more around the statutory auditor, but yes, the internal auditor is also expected to report frauds in case he discovers fraud as part of the internal audit that he does, to the audit committee and the board. So the internal auditor also has to report that. SEBI, in case of listed companies, basically talks about reporting of forensic audit. Forensic audit can be called by any name. There's no category that it has to be called as forensic audit only. SEBI says that obviously you need to inform about the fact that there is a forensic audit which has been initiated. As हम लोग सब देख रहे हैं ये जो Yes Bank, NSC, all of these where we have seen that we get in the news that there are forensic audit initiate हो गया है. Why? Because obviously there is a requirement to disclose. So that's how it gets intimated to the regulator. And yes, at the end to be completed by submitting the final forensic audit report. RBI, IRDI, they have got a FMR reporting format, which very categorically tells what and when to report to the regulators. Both RBI and IRDA more or less kind of have an identical reporting fraud monitoring returns, which are to be filed with them at defined frequency, quarterly, monthly, and all of that. Last but not the least, I have taken this actually from you know, one of the articles or that I was going through, but I am not sure if this is relevant or this is actually, do we really have a SA 250 which basically provides for an approach to be followed by auditors for identification of fraud and assessment. Anyone, any view on this standard of auditing 240? Because I have seen SA 240 talks about something else. It talks about using work of an expert.
SA 240 doesn't talk about the experts, Rahul.
Okay, so yeah, okay,
It's
sorry. So
about
maybe
fraud.
I'm
See,
yeah,
it
yeah,
talks about auditors' responsibility towards fraud. And as an audit process, if you are doing statutory audit,
yeah,
actually, when you say that you have not come across fraud or the management has not reported any fraud, this essay
yeah.
requires you to inquire from the management in writing that whether any fraud has taken place or what
Okay,
are the fraud prevention policy you are having. Most of us auditors are not doing that actually. But once this financial control authority takes any audit of
okay,
the auditor, these issues come and then the financial reporting authority tells you that you have carried out a audit, but which was not an audit. Where is your communication to the management that you
okay,
have inquired about the fraud taking place or not? What are the policy for fraud prevention that you have not documented actually? So how can we rely that you have complied with this SA 240?
okay, okay. Do we have
Yeah.
got
So
any
this is
responsibility of reporting anything at the institute? I mean, or is it only with the regulatory authority? Anyone has any guidance on that?
institute I am not aware, but
Regulatories
as
only,
far as
not with the
RBI is concerned, you are
Yeah,
supposed to report. If you come across a fraud, then you
right.
should report. One of my chartered accountant friend was doing the audit
Okay,
of a company for a long time, and
okay,
this company was
okay,
a general company. Its
okay,
activity crossed the threshold limit of 50%, so it became an NBFC, which he
okay,
maybe could not found out during the audit. But
okay,
what happened later on? This company was being merged with another company which was an NBFC. When that
okay,
NBFC went to the RBI for merger of this company, they came out that the company which they are merging itself is an NBFC because of that 50-50 rule. And then they started investigation against the auditor, saying that why didn't you report us? So there is a requirement.
okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But the institute doesn't ask us to report anything to them because I haven't,
I don't think
kind of
so. I don't think
seen
I have
that
not come
any
across any
any
provision.
auditors.
no, no,
Yeah,
no. Institute doesn't ask.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't think Chartered Accountants Act or regulation or rules anywhere it states that as an
Because I
auditor.
wanted a view more from a firm of chartered accountants, who has been appointed to do something while they obviously report to the board audit committee, but also do they have to go back and report to the institute? I
No,
don't
no,
know.
I don't
No,
think
huh?
I don't think there is any such provision.
Okay.
It is the other way. It is the other way. If
Okay.
you have done the audit of a bank, forget bank, any other, say you have done the audit of a proprietor, and if he
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
a complaint to the institute, then there is a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So they
The,
may
the
approach
proprietor,
directly.
proprietor, proprietor can go to the institute saying that in my account there was a fraud, and
Okay.
your auditor has not pointed it out to me.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then the
Understood.
institute can take the action under the disciplinary proceeding.
Okay. Understood. Right. Okay. Yeah. Just move to the next. Yeah, so these are the references that I have used in the case studies that we've discussed in this. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm done. Thank you. Thank you very much for the patient listening and trying to make it a little engaging one and interacting one with all your questions and inputs that you have given in between. Any more questions, I'll be more than happy to address them right away.
Very good, Rahul. Very good exposition. Very good. And your presentation was very good, articulate, and understandable. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you
Rahul.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will give you official thank you vote of thanks from Kanika. He will give you vote of thanks, Rahul. Just wait for a minute. Kanika,
Yeah.
can you give
Yeah.
the vote of thanks to Rahul? Okay.
Yeah. So Rahul, thank you so much. It was a wonderful, amazing, and a very insightful session on the fraud scenarios. I'm sure like all of us who are doing the internal audits have like come across some or the other fraud scenarios. But I think a few specific things which were like shown in your presentation would help us to look on all of those scenarios a little differently, little in depth, and probably have us a better conclusions when we are trying to look at such scenarios in the internal audit sessions also. I would also like to mention like the entire flow of the presentation, right from right from different types of frauds to how can we identify them, how are they impacting us, relating it to the real time case studies, and then the 9-step matrix for identification and detection and prevention of frauds was very, very helpful. I think personally I have learned a lot from this. So thank you so much.
Thank you everyone once again.
Rahul,
Thank you,
thank you
everyone.
everyone. Thank you, Ramsu. Gauri, thanks, Kanika. Thanks, Mehul.
Thank you. Thank you, Tarun.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Bye. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Same here.
Thank you, Kanika. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ramsu.
Okay, bye. See you.